Formula One heads to Miami for the first time. No one can afford tickets and media passes are apparently rarer than McLaren F1s. G'day, my name is James Baldwin and welcome to another episode of Lakeside Drive's F1 podcast. In this episode, we preview the Miami Grand Prix. And I'm joined by the OG, my friend and yours. It's only two of us today. G'day, Campy. How you doing?
G'day, mate. How are you?
We're going right back. Very first two episodes of this podcast back in 2019 was
immaculate conception of our idea to to do a podcast, mate.
What could possibly go wrong is something that I'm pretty sure we said back then, and lots evidently. There's been some choice reviews come out in the last couple of weeks of people have. All over the place. Not necessarily agreeing with our style, but it doesn't really matter. I don't really care. If you have the time to leave a review, then that's great. Good for you. I'm very, very happy that you've got the time to do that.
Real question is would they actually say that to my face, Jim? I'm not sure they'd have a crack. I think they'd probably look and go, maybe not. But hey, that's all right.
One of the things that people will know, those of you who came along to our Melbourne Grand Prix catch-up drinks, is that Campy is just in fact not a younger Mick Malloy, but he is just in fact a beautiful teddy bear with a new beanie. Mate, I thought this would be a great opportunity. And look, thank you so much for listening. And for those of you who do leave ratings and reviews, either positive or negative, it doesn't really matter. You're here, you're part of the community. That's what we love here at Lakeside Drive. And Campy, what I thought might be good, as it's just the two of us, it is the OG, as I said, is just to have a bit of a chat about really what we were trying to do when we stood up this podcast before we start talking about Miami. And how far it's come since then, because, mate, I actually don't think you and I have had a proper conversation about this really since the whole thing has developed from Oz F1 into Lakeside Drive.
No, it's been a bit hard. You've moved away, which sort of threw the whole thing into a bit of a monkey barrel, and we weren't too sure what was going to happen there for a while. But like all things, you've got to put in some effort at times and just work hard on it. But yeah, what a ride. It's been fun, mate. We're going into our fourth year now. Name change was interesting. Not that I'm particularly fussed about that stuff, but it's more about the on-track for me. The on-track's getting better and better the more and more that the longer we go on. I think the more that you invest into the sport and the more that you look into the storylines and here, it just means the race day build-up's bigger and there's more to look for than what just cars going around a track in circles. So I think that's really it for me. The more you buy in, the more you invest, the more you get out of the sport. But as for the podcast and where we want it to go, look, I've got a super busy life where I am at the moment. And, pace is the pace of it's just getting faster and faster, which is a good thing. And for the podcast, this is really just my number one hobby that I do outside of work and all the other stuff I've got on, and I had really no expectations for it. You'd sort of tell us about you, Jim. You sort of developed a bit of a dream about 18 months in that, hey, this is what you want to do full time and you want to do it professionally. There's been some really good doors open up for you, particularly in the last sort of 6 to 8 months, doing some extreme E stuff. You've been over in the UK this week at McLaren all week with Freya, so it's been really beautiful to watch, and for me and Tommy, it's just good to be part of, whatever your dream looks like a bit. So, it's good. Tell us a bit about that too.
That's it's very sweet of you, mate. It's turning into just a genuine love session here. That's okay, listener. Normal service will resume. And this is the thing, guys. When Campy and I get together, we just have a normal chat. We need the we need the jeopardy of Tommy T to get in there to poke the bear, so to speak, and to look at me and roll eyes through either in person or over video. No, absolutely right, mate. I think the one thing that is absolutely paramount is that this was never about us. It is always about you, the listener, and developing a community of Australians effectively. And yes, we've got some fantastic people overseas as well. But first and foremost, it was back in 2019 about creating an Australian community to talk about Formula One. That in a market that wasn't necessarily well served. Of course, that was before Drive to Survive was released and the million other Formula One podcasts that have been released since. But it is really, really growing. We know that there's about 2,000 of you who listen very regularly every week, and you are all over the world. We met some of you in Melbourne. Freya and I will hopefully meet some of you in Miami this coming weekend at the Grand Prix there. And it is, as you say, Campy, an interesting thing. One of the things that probably not many people know about is, yes, like the Lakeside Drive, the name changed, but the show format changed really towards the mid part of 2020. And the big reason for that was actually Greg Rust, of all people. Rusty, I got in touch with Rusty, and this was in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and he was in New Zealand. Clearly didn't have a lot to do, if I'm perfectly honest. But out of the goodness of his heart, he look. I sent him an email. This is part of the thing, I suppose. And those of you who know me or have a conversation with me know that I love sending an email and trying to get things done. And anyway, I sent him an email, asked for his some advice for myself trying to progress things forward, and he called me like 25 minutes later after I sent the email, and it was a really fantastic chat around what this is building into. He also enjoyed Campy's breathing, and when I say enjoyed, it's probably not the right word.
Very critical.
So we absolutely don't hold that against him. But anyway, it's just a sidebar to say that the show format that you have right now in front of you is a massive thanks to Greg Rust. So the show is doing amazing things. Campy, as you said, yes, Extreme E is doing wonderful things as well. Also built that confidence out of Lakeside Drive. And as you said, we spent last week at McLaren Applied Technologies doing a new podcast for them. We spent some time at MTC as well, and had a full tour there. So the world of motorsport absolutely opening up more and more, which is fantastic. But again, it is just about you, the fan. That is what the point is that I wanted to get across about Lakeside Drive. Campy, let's talk a little bit about F1 news before we talking about Miami as a whole and the Grand Prix, what we can expect. Yep. I want to get your thoughts on Red Bull Racing, because this is the first 1-2, and we didn't really speak about this because we came straight out of the race and from Imola, but it's the first 1-2 since Malaysia 2016. DR and Max. DR number 1, Max number 2. That was the last time that Red Bull had a 1-2.
Really?
It's an epic amount of time, isn't it? It is an epic amount of time.
Well, so was that Max's second win? Would have been, because his first win was at Spain.
No, DR won that Barcelona race, so that was P2 for Max, of course, because DR was still spanking Max back in 2016. But anyway, the point is, it's been a long time since, and the question is this: the reliability issues that have plagued Red Bull in the first 2 rounds were pretty significant, and we saw really them scrambling between the AlphaTauri cars and between the Red Bull Racing cars to try and figure out what was going on. However, that was a massive stand in the right direction. Here's my question. It could potentially be a little bit too early in the season to ask this yet, Campy, but is this the sign of Red Bull Racing breaking that reliability issue, getting on top of it, and really showing the performance of this car? Because we've said, haven't we, that it is looking like that Red Bull is the fastest car on the grid, but Ferrari had the most consistent package.
Oh, look, it is the first. We're 4 races in now. 4 races in to a new category, essentially. New motors, new chassis, ground effect cars, first 4 races in. And there is a hell of a lot for these teams to learn. I think the data they're collecting for the mid up until the halfway point of this season is all going to go into the development of the cars next year. I wouldn't worry too much about Red Bull's reliability in the first 2 races. These things are bound to happen. I would give the field and every manufacturer, every racing team and every driver the big thumbs up, probably except for Latifi this year, just because of the amount of spins he's had and the damage he's created. These guys are incredible to put new cars, new chassis out on track, albeit with the same sort of technology that we ran last year in the ICUs and the ICEs and things like that. But to have the reliability that we've seen thus far is staggering. You go back to the 90s, you'd have 7 or 8 cars blowing up a session, think about some of those dog McLarens of yesteryear in the late 90s that just blew up, leading Grand Prix by a minute and a half, with 30 laps into it. So I think where the sport is at the moment is pretty incredible. So the answer to your question is no, I wouldn't worry about the early stuff. Red Bull as an organisation and now an engine manufacturer, and a bloody good one, will have all that stuff figured out behind closed doors. Might be a few road bumps here and there, but look, the two races that, we've seen the Red Bulls win and Max driving, he's just able to hunt that Ferrari down in the back, back 15, 20 laps. It's like the car gets to a level of performance when the fuel's down to 20 litres and it's right. We can go, and we can go quicker and harder than anybody else. And they just seem to rope him in. Even the sprint race last weekend, it was that last 3 laps that Max really pushed Leclerc and got in front of him. So I think, and then gapped him by 5 or 6 seconds as well. So I wouldn't worry about it. I think they're only, 21 points behind after 4 races, and they've only finished 2 of them. And Max has won both of them. I think Max will have a year like last year where he either gets first or second, or he doesn't finish the race at all. That's how good this guy and this car is, and this organisation. So I think that's where it's at.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thought, especially for Max. I like that very, very much. I want to talk about the team that really surprised us with just how poorly they are doing this year, and that is Mercedes. Now, you and I spoke to Richard Saxby, who I also caught up with in person last week. It was a brilliant chat. Even more stories in person that are absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, the interesting part that I want to pull out of the interview that we had with him was that he said that the interesting thing for him is in Mercedes now, a lot of the senior team were junior members of the team when they started winning championships. So they haven't really had an ability to try and go, well, hang on a second, this car is not fast enough, we're losing, we need to turn it around quickly. They've been able to win consistently for such a long period of time. For you, Campy, and the question is out there, and I get asked this quite often actually at the moment, when do you think Mercedes is going to bounce back? When do you think Lewis is going to be, is this the year that Lewis takes his championship to beat Michael to its 8 world championships? I've got an answer, but I'm interested in knowing what yours is.
Look, the thing for me is, the thing I took out of that is that the cost cap and why Richard decided to step down was the pressure was just getting to a point where he just couldn't handle it anymore. He knew the cost cap was going to be big for Mercedes. And if you look at that organisation and the key sort of 20 to 25 personnel that have left over the last 3 years, I just don't think those environments, looking back at it, I don't think those environments are easy places to work at times. Yes, they're fulfilling. Yes, they're extremely hardworking, and yes, you're around the best people in the world. But realistically, you're not going to go through a whole career in a place like that with the standards it has, which I think is inducive to why they've had such high turnover at the top end after the 6 or 7 world championships on the trot that they won. Cost cap, unbelievably tough for them as well, and they knew it was going to hit hard. And I think guys like Saxby just decided, well, it's probably not worth it anymore. I've given this genuinely 10 years and decided to move on. So I think that's where a lot of Mercedes issues are probably coming out of. I think the cost cap hurts the IP and the personnel that they've lost throughout the organisation has been hard. And other teams have picked that up as well. I mean, Mercedes have learnt things about these motors, getting them to, near on near, I think it's 55%, thermal efficiency now, which is unbelievable for any car and technology moving forward. But, once these guys know how to get there, they move to other organisations and the other organisations catch up to us. So I think it's a bit of everything. We saw the culmination of it last year where Red Bull was the only team to really mix it with them, but they've just fallen right off the pace this year. The other thing too is that he spoke about was, will they come back and how they'll come back and what their process look like. They'll be throwing absolutely everything at it, but I think it'll be probably next year before we see them really back on top and understand this car. At that point, we will discover whether they've lost too much time, like the Ferraris and the Red Bulls have in this previous era. They seem to understand what was wrong, figure out what Mercedes had done a year behind what they'd done. So, yeah, look, it's tough for them. It's hard to watch. No one likes Lewis seeing him driving around in P14 and Russell really getting the better of him at times so thus far. But with 4 races in, I still can't read into it. I just don't think they'll be the 4th best car on the grid this year.
I want to talk about Carlos Sainz now. He's an absolute Carlos, an absolute fan favourite, isn't he? Especially Lakeside Drive. We think he's an incredible driver. Obviously had a bit of a struggle to the start of the season so far. 2 races in a row. Right. 2 races in a row that he unfortunately ended up in the gravel facing the wrong direction. Interestingly enough, though, he's come out to one of the Formula One journalists and say that he's having to use different techniques that he's not used to, which is an interesting comment for him because he really settled into the Ferrari last year, which is obviously very different from the McLaren the year before that. These ground effect cars, of course, we know the porpoising is pretty significant across most of these teams, but he's hustling hard. Now, I suppose, as you say, it's 4 races. We're down 4 races in the calendar. There's a lot more to go. But what do you think Carlos can actually really expect now? I mean, there is a significant lead ahead with Charles. He's going to have some bad luck, Charles is, for Carlos really to be able to make a significant dent and have any ability to catch up to this World Championship sooner rather than later, surely.
Yeah, well, Charles has made a couple of mistakes this year already, albeit, one of them was in the race in 3rd position last week. But they're the times where Carlos has to maximise the points against him. But through his own mistakes and, through some bad luck too, he hasn't been able to capitalise on those. I think, I've said it before, if you look at Carlos's career, he's sort of a guy that's never dominated a teammate. If we go back to his first, Max Verstappen, him and Max went toe to toe for the 6 or 7 months that they were racing together. And then when he went to the Renault and even with his team with Hulkenberg, yes, he was better than Hulkenberg, but he never dominated those teammates like we saw, Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton do to their respective teammates. And it's interesting for me that Carlos is a guy that he's got a benchmark, and his benchmark is very good no matter who he's driving against, but he's sort of one of these guys that almost drives to where his main competition is, and he's always in a tight, tussling battle. Now, he's a notoriously slow starter, but I think the main difference between Carlos and Leclerc is that Carlos's best and worst, there's a big gap between it, but Leclerc's a lot more consistent. And Carlos will have weekends this year where he beats Leclerc by half a second and everyone's scratching their heads going, geez, where did this pace come from? And there'll be times where he's 3 tenths off and scratching his head going, how do we get back? Where is this 3.5 tenths in this car? I just think that's the nature of the two drivers. I think the reason he is trying new things is because he's really trying to get the best out of himself. We saw DR with it last year really struggle to adapt to a new car, and this may just be that Carlos has encountered something that he's never had to encounter before, and it'll just take some time to get used to. But these guys are consummate professionals; they'll figure it out, and they'll get better and better as they go on. Ferrari's not the team that it was in yesteryear, where it's playing favourites. They don't need to be playing favourites yet. I still think there's enough meat on the table for them moving forward. It's going to be not probably they'll be looking at next year and the year after for World Championships because I don't think their car's there yet. But Ferrari's shown some faith in him, giving him an extension this early on to sort of match that Leclerc thing because they see the value in him. So I just think a bit of time, 4 races in, we're all jumping on the bandwagon, or people are jumping on the bandwagon pretty quick, and it could turn around really quickly as well. So, yeah,
very well said. No, very well said. Love that, and look forward to seeing Carlos back on top ASAP. Who was back on top really last weekend was McLaren. Pace significantly different from the first 2 rounds. Lots of questions around whether it's a track-specific pace like we would have spoken about in 2019 and 2020 with DR in Renault, especially where he was absolutely stonking everyone around circuits like Spa, for example. But for the rest of the front half of the season, I should say, the tracks start to get a little different depending on where we go. And the conversation around Imola and Albert Park being somewhat similar is there. Certainly, McLaren looked a lot stronger in Imola than a lot of people were expecting. So the question is, Campy, is the McLaren, the MCL 36, is it a track-specific fast car, or are they making some real gains that other teams maybe not necessarily like Mercedes making yet to be able to better themselves for each weekend?
Oh, I think the car that we're seeing on track now compared to week one and that second test are polar opposites. They've figured out their issues. Andreas Seidel's got a big after that practice 2 in Melbourne on day 1. He was super happy. He was walking around, big jump in his step. Then he just looked like the pressure was off him because they'd figured out the issue and they were back on pace. I think the first race we go to, which probably this weekend, Miami, I believe it's supposed to be pretty hot over there, sort of mid-30s. Is that right? So that'll be a test. I mean, sun over there, new track. Yeah, it'll be a test. We'll see how this braking issue goes if they've figured it out. I think the comparisons between Melbourne and Imola are right. And if you look at track temperatures and the way it sort of played out weather-wise, they were very similar too, except that we saw Imola with the wet. We had all that moisture in the air in Melbourne, but it wasn't quite apparent. So it's a wait and see, really, isn't it? I think their main championship rival at the moment is probably Mercedes. I don't think they've got the pace at the moment to match Red Bull or Ferrari, even if it's track specific. The only track that they'll be able to stay in front of a Ferrari is probably Monaco, and a Red Bull, just because of the nature of the track and the passing, etc., etc. So, look, we're 4 races in. I mean, let's not get on the bandwagon and say this. We're not ruling in absolutes and, authoritarianism at the moment. It's sort of, there's a long season. We got, 21 races left? Is that what we got this year?
It feels like there's
massive.
A lot more races.
Yeah.
A lot more races than needs to be. Well, look, bandwagoning. I'm here for it, to be honest. Because let's get onto this bandwagon. Rumour mill, Oscar Piastri to replace Nicholas Latifi. The rumours are rife that it's even going to happen halfway through this year. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but it is potentially an option for Williams next year. I did raise this in our last podcast in terms of a potential partnership with Renault to get some new engines. And on our next point, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But for you, Campy, Nick Latifi, you mentioned very early on in the podcast that, you're not necessarily impressed with his performance so far with our favourite Canadian, also the Prime Minister of Canada as well, it seems. But for Oscar de Piastri to replace him halfway through a season, I think is ridiculous and stupid. I don't think Jos Capito is going to let that happen. As much as I want to see Oscar in the seat, seems like a dumb idea, but let's talk about the bandwagon and rumour mill, Campy.
Nope, not going to happen. He's a paid driver. He's bringing way too much cash to that organisation to be getting someone like Oscar in, unfortunately. Oscar would be way quicker than him straight off the bat, I believe. But it's not going to happen. I don't think there's much in the rumour. That's just people on the internet doing their things, a bit like us, Jim, making it up as they go along. And this one's got some heat, and we'll move on from there straight away. Can't see it happening.
No.
There's no way Renault's going to let him go. But there's no way that Williams will let Latifi go either, because he just brings too much cash to the organisation, and they'll be looking at last year's results going, oh, geez, we can still get a bit more out of him. So there you go.
Here's the big thing, and this has been talked about for a very long time, to the point actually where I don't think we've really mentioned this on the podcast, but it's Audi and Porsche and their entry back into Formula One. So the new engine regulations 2026, we know that Porsche has showed really significant interest in Red Bull powertrains. And last year there was conversations going on about Audi and McLaren. Now, on top of that is now that they have stalled those conversations potentially. And so Aston Martin may be looking at partnering with Audi. The problem is Williams also seem to be open to partnering with a different engine manufacturer as well. So it does seem that basically if you've got a Mercedes power unit at the moment, you're willing to talk to Porsche or Audi. Campy, this has been going around for a long time. As we know, as I said, we haven't really spoken about this on the podcast, but I mean, it's going to be good for the sport for these guys to enter.
Porsche and Audi Porsche and Audi are under that VW, that Volkswagen Group banner. And F1 has been trying to get these guys into the sport for a long time. Everybody thought that now that Red Bull had acquired the powertrain on paper, but Honda's still involved, Red Bull have acquired the powertrain engine company off of Honda. They thought everyone in the paddock had talked about that leaves the door open for Red Bull to go and do a deal with the VW group, whether it be Porsche or Audi, to get into F1, which has been their target for a long, long time. The VW group doesn't really see F1 as a great investment historically, hence why we haven't seen the manufacturers involved. They just think it's dominated by a couple of big dogs like Ferrari and McLaren and Mercedes too, and they just don't want to put their hat in the ring for that. But it's certainly paved the way. Now, the new regulations in 2026, the Volkswagen Group's been really vocal about the MGUH, the heat recovery part of the motor, being way too expensive for them to invest in. The other teams have spent, sort of 8, 9, 10 years into this technology and other parts of the car now that they think they are way too far behind the ball game to catch up to everybody else. So they've been vocal about that. So they want that part of the car removed. Where some of the manufacturers, like Ferrari, don't really want them there anyway. So there's a bit of politics going on behind closed doors within organisations, but I think Formula One wants Volkswagen Group involved. How that'll happen, Lawrence Stroll is a good businessman, smart guy. He'll probably put a deal together. You got guys like Toto, even Zach. These guys would love to have the VW Group in because the bigger and better the sport in the manufacturing space, the better for everybody, really. So these guys are smart boys. They'll be able to work with the VW Group in various business sides of the sport to get them involved. And there's a lot of tender processes for work out there, a lot like McLaren applied. There's a lot of McLaren parts on all cars this year. Just, the way it works, they might get VW Group in somehow like that, so they start supplying certain parts and certain regs just to wet their toes a bit to get them in the sport. But eventually they will be here.
Yeah, well, 2026 seems where it's going to be with these new regulations and power units. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out. Certainly, as you said, with Lawrence Stroll, after he's completely killed that team, maybe he can bring it back again by bringing another brand involved with Aston Martin. Let's talk now about Miami. Now, this is going to be a pretty fantastic race by all accounts. It's going to be one massive party. So set up the top. It's been impossible to get tickets. The pre-sale didn't even happen. Apparently all the tickets were sold before pre-sale, and then some tickets were released afterwards for a very, very hefty amount of money for a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday or a 3-day pass, which is not worth it. Let's be perfectly honest in terms of what you actually get to see from the GA area. Anyway, it's going to be a big party. As I said, Lewis Hamilton thinks it's going to be the best race of the year. For you, Campy, it's 57 laps, 19 corners,
it's the worst.
5.4 kilometres. It's a brand new circuit. Yes, it is in the car park, but they have laid some new tarmac across the car park around the Hard Rock Stadium. The one key thing that I keep hearing from people is, let's just remember that it's not Miami Beach. It is in the swamp part of Miami up near the stadium, so it might not look as pretty as people are expecting.
Oh, good on them. I mean, they've wanted to make the US a destination, and I think Drive to Survive really solidified the fans of this sport, and it's brought people into it so that now they're interested. F1 it's seen differently to what a NASCAR or an IndyCar looks like in the States. They're very redneck sports. They're very niche to a certain group of people, but F1 sort of transcends that, just because it's got history, it's got lots of glitz and glamour, which parts of America love, I suppose. That fame thing, keeping it really exclusive in Miami Beach, big party, exclusive, expensive. I mean, they're really catering to a certain market. Are they actual F1 fans, or is it just going to be a ton of celebrities there? Probably, and I'll hate watching that on TV. But hey, there it goes. Hey, good on them. They're trying new things. We've got 3 races in the States now with Vegas next year, so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and what it looks like on TV. Do I think it'll be a bit of a train wreck? Yes. Do I think that it'll be a bit over the top this weekend with all the extra BS going on that we're probably not used to? Absolutely. Is it going to be more Americanized? Probably. Are they going to do grid walkouts like they did a couple of years ago in Coda, and it'd be way over the top with a celebrity hanging off each of the drivers' hands? Yes. Am I going to hate that? Yes. But if it gets more people watching our sport, I don't particularly care, because I think it's a great sport. It's great for people to get involved and great to watch, and hey, more people to listen to us, Jim. So, yeah.
One of the things I would say, if you are worried or concerned about the Americanization of Formula One, you don't have to watch every race. There is no one forcing you to watch every race, and I think there will be absolutely races like this, as you said, Campy, the glitz, the glamour. The grid walk is going to be interesting. I look forward to Martin Brundle saying I did because I can many, many times to many different security guards of B to G grade celebrities, which I imagine are going to be on the grid for Formula One. Then
how many rappers do you think we'll see that we don't even know who they are?
Most of them, let's be honest.
Like
Absolutely.
20, what are we up to? 20 chains now, and little Wayne, or what?
It's just good Lord. Mate, I think you're spot on though in terms of how it's going to look. Interestingly, with the Miami Grand Prix, and I don't understand this, but they like they do the drivers' parade with the truck that drives the drivers around. They have a bit of a chat. They're doing the same with the team principals for this weekend. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. None of the team principals actually want to do this either. But talking about the Drive to Survive thing, people like Gunter and Toto and Christian all now have massively bigger profiles than any team principal has ever done before. So in that same vein, they might need to suck it up and just get on the truck, Campy.
Whatever happened to the drivers being the stars? Well, I mean, team principals, they are not people. They are smart, high functioning individuals that probably hate fame and attention, but it's a part of their job that they just sort of get thrust upon when they amount to these positions, and how they handle it's interesting. But I don't like it. But hey, it's cool. This is America, man. They can do what they want over there, and the promoters can do it however they'd like it. You know, they get a crack at it to get it right once, and the fans will speak out. The hardcore fans will speak on about it. This is a part of the sport too that, you know, I can't stand. I go to the Oz Grand Prix and it was great. Loved it. We met some awesome people there, but there's just a part of me that just loses faith in humanity when I go to events like this. You know, there's people that have nothing to do with this sport, absolutely don't know anything about it, yet spend tens of thousands of dollars on all these ritzy tickets to all these fancy places that cut the rest of it out just because it's seen to be the place to be for that weekend in Melbourne. And, you know, that side of our sport frustrates me a bit.
Yeah, there's plenty of that going on.
And I'm a bit cynical at 5 to 7 on a Monday morning. So,
well, no one blames you for it. Well, let's talk about what your expectations are for the track and who you think will be significantly powerful here. As we said, we've come off a back of Imola with a 1-2 for Red Bull, first time since Malaysia 2016. Do you think they're able to continue that pace going forward? Or do you think Charles is going to be able to drag back a little bit of that with the Ferrari?
I think it'll be Red Bull will dominate, or Max and Red Bull will dominate. Whether Perez gets Leclerc or Sainz, who knows? That guy can be, you know, right with Max or 40 seconds behind him at times. So I think Red Bull, that'll be my tip every race this year. I think Danny Rick, I actually think he's really been on top of Lando this year in terms of race pace, not so much over one lap, but he's getting it together over one lap. Unlike we saw last year where there was consistently, you know, 3 to 5 tenths between the best of them sitting there going, what are you doing, Danny Rick? But it just seems like they're out of sync all the time. They're not running a lap, you know, behind each other. It's like Lando will do a lap, then Danny Rick will do a lap and he'll better it by half a second. Then Lando will get his run. And I think Danny Rick's been on top really race pace-wise all year. Just picks up that one to 1.5 tenths in qualifying. I think he'll I think this is the weekend that we'll start to see Danny Rick outperform Lando on a consistent basis. So I'm looking forward. I'm most excited for that because it's been pretty slim pickings and frustrating to watch F1 this year as a Danny Rick fan. I mean, after that first race, I thought, geez, this is going to be a long year, Jim. How on earth are we going to do a podcast and remain positive after this? But the podium last weekend, albeit very lucky for McLaren, suggests to me that Danny Rick's going to have a win this year, a couple of wins and a couple of podiums, so it'll be good for us, I think. And Lando will still be winless by the end of the year. Good thing to see for our mob over here.
Yes, it certainly has, but that's okay because we still have faith, like I'm sure you do too, dear listener. Well, thank you so much, Campy, for previewing the Miami Grand Prix. Of course, we will have a lot more to talk about next week after the Miami Grand Prix. As I mentioned earlier, Freya and I will be around, probably not at the track at this rate, but certainly around. Head over to our Discord for all of those details, or on our Instagram. They're the best place to find that. And also a massive shout out to our Discord community. Fantastic as always, all the time, great content, especially over race weekend. If you need someone to go to chat about everything F1, that is your place to do it. But it's time to say goodbye. We will be chatting after the Miami Grand Prix.
Sorry, mate. The missus just come in the side door outside and absolutely scared the shit out of me. Oh, okay. Mate. Oh, it's got the fright of my life. What are you doing, you squid? You just come through the door. You're hilarious. You look beautiful at 6 a.m, darling.
Oh, good Lord. That is...
That's a good sting for the end.
Squid recovery system deployed.